It's going to be one of those days. Yeah, I know.
His sign is wrong.
I know. Thank you. I wrote his name down just in case.
Is David giving us an update on the?
I don't know. I didn't hear that part. We don't. Good afternoon, residents of Everett, Washington. I'd like to call the order this Everett City Council meeting of October 30th, 2024. For more information on council meetings and how to participate, please visit everettwa.gov/city council. And I'd like to this is our first meeting in a while during the day. So I would ask that if you are a guest or a presenter, if you could put your sound on mute and your video on pause until you're called upon, that would be fantastic. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mayor Franklin. Here. Councilmember Toohey. Here. Councilmember Bader.
Here.
Councilmember Ryan. Here. Vice President Zarlingo.
Here.
Councilmember Vogely. Here. Councilmember Fossey. Here. President Schwab.
Here. At this time, I'd like to ask Councilmember Bader to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to ask Councilmember Toohey to read the land acknowledgement.
My pleasure. The City Council wishes to acknowledge the original inhabitants of this place, the Stohuchi people and their successors, the Tulalip tribes. Since time immemorial, they have hunted, fished, gathered on, and taken care of these lands and waters. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and water. We will strive to be honest about our past mistakes and bring about a future that includes their people, stories, and voices to form a more just and equitable society.
Thank you. Under old business, do I hear a motion for approval of the minutes for October 23rd, 2024?
So moved?
Seconded.
Okay, motion and second's been made. Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Toohey.
Yes.
Councilmember Bader.
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan. Yes. Vice President Zarlingo.
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely. Yes. Councilmember Fossey.
Yes.
President Schwab.
Yes, and good afternoon, Mayor.
Good afternoon, President Schwab and council members. As you know, we've been working really hard to fully staff our police department for many, many years. And so last week I was very honored to attend the soft opening of the new police academy up in Arlington. And having this facility in our backyard is really going to help in our recruitment and training efforts. It'll cut down wait time for new officers in entering the academy and allow them to get their training much closer to home. For Everett, this center is more than a training facility. We are very excited to have 2 team members assigned to support the academy, including our training center's commander, Lieutenant Morgan, and Officer Shuck. And that investment is going to help us actually get more training slots and really hopefully fully staff up our team more quickly. Also, this morning, I had the honor of attending the 30th anniversary of Naval Station Everett. I was joined by Senator Henry M. Jackson's daughter, Anne Marie, and former Everett Mayor Moore's son, Jeff Moore. Senator Jackson and Mayor Moore were instrumental in getting the base here in Everett, and so it was an honor to be there with them. And I just wanted to congratulate Base Commander Worthier and her team for having a wonderful base here in Everett, and look forward to having it here for many years to come. And lastly, next week is voting day, Tuesday. So please turn in your ballots by Tuesday. And that's all I have for today. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Now it's time for public comment, which includes written comment acknowledgement. Under our rules, written comments shall be considered in the same manner as oral comments. The person submitting the comment must provide their name and city of residence. This requirement is made so it's made part of the official record. Good afternoon, Angie. Do we have any written comments or anyone signed up to speak?
Good afternoon, President Schwab. We have no written comments, but we do have 2 people here to speak. So if Steve could please come to the podium. Steve Reed? Yes, if you'd like to come to the podium. Yep. And please state your first or your full name and city of residence, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. My name is Steve Reed, and my city technically is Monroe, but I really live in the county. Ladies and gentlemen of the council, I should say, not the county. Gentlemen in attendance, thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. In 1979, I purchased a piece of property out off Old Pipeline Road, which was gravel at the time, if anybody can remember that far back. I've lived there since. In 1998, during one of my projects, I paid the city to put in a water meter. And I've had it sitting there since 1998 with the full expectation of being able to hook up to it one of these days. On Monday, August 26th, a city crew removed that meter. I spent a week on the phone getting emails and finally received an email from Jeff Mars the following week, who explained in his letter that the council had passed EMC 1416-460J about non-usage and meters being removed. The problem I have is that I received no notification of any kind. No letter, no flag, nothing. We're just going to rip it out. I'm running out of water. That's why I bought the meter in the first place. At this point, I've expended approximately $12,000 to the city for the right to have that meter. I'd like to have it back. I'd like to be able to hook up to it and use it, which was my intention in the first place. My question for you is simply, was it your intention to have these meters removed without any notice? I mean, you passed an ordinance and I understand why you passed it, and that's fine. But shouldn't I be given the opportunity to use my meter to make the connections that I had planned on doing? If I hadn't paid my bill, wouldn't you have sent me a notice that said, hey, pay your bill or we're going to shut you off? Nothing. Crickets. My question, of course, follows, is that the way you treat your citizens, your taxpayers? Is that the way you want to be treated? Anyway, I need your help. It's the bottom line here. I'm still one of those people that believes that leaders and representatives are there to help the people that they serve. So that's what I'm asking you. Help me resolve the situation. My meter should be put back. I've paid on time. And to add insult to injury, I've received a final billing, which includes a disconnect fee. Really? I didn't want it disconnected. Now I understand why you passed it. And if I've hit my 3 minutes, please forgive me. Again, the question is why? Why wasn't I notified? Why was this done under cover of darkness? Boom, it's gone. So, not sure how you can help me, but I certainly am looking for whatever you can do. Any questions from anybody?
No, but if you could share your contact information with Jennifer Gregerson so that our team at the water utility can follow up with you, that would be wonderful.
Okay, they have explained to me why it was removed. Okay. My question is,
Well, thank you very much. If you could
why wasn't I
handle with her,
notified?
thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Next, if Ethan could please come to the podium. And state your full name and city of residence. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Ethan Fall, Granite Falls, Washington. As you guys all know me, I represent laborers all across the Northwest. I'm here today to speak on behalf of Paula Ryan's bill that she introduced, 2410-28. Councilmember Bader, you had some questions about it last week. Councilmember Paula Ryan did pretty good answering most of them, but I'm going to speak on behalf of just the incidents that the laborers union has ran into over the previous years. Now, again, I can only speak on behalf of the construction industry, but in the last 5 years, there have been some substantial wage theft. And this is just one of the compliance officers that found these issues. So 3 projects affecting 53 workers totaled $63,575.82 in initial findings. After it was turned over to the state, upon further investigation, the state found 17 more workers affected from these 3 projects and totaled it was $257,315. That was all stolen from the workers. And these are City of Everett projects. Another instance of wage theft is a 401k fraud that was uncovered by our compliance officer. The company willingly stole $41,170 from 2 employees. Since these settlements have been reached, one of those contractors was forced to close their doors. The other is still thriving and winning work here in your city. I'm not here to smear the contractors' names, but more to shed light on the severity of the situation. Wage theft is more common than you might think, and it comes in various forms. If I was to walk down to the bank right now and rob them for $257,000, the chief here would have me face down in cuffs, arrested on those exact same streets that contractor stole money, potentially. I urge you to pass the ordinance as it creates minimum financial stress on the city to administer, yet it is there to use when necessary for the contractors that violate those rules. Thank you.
That concludes our public comments.
Okay, thank you. Now it's time for council comments. Councilmember Tui.
Yeah, just real briefly, I did attend the Council of Neighborhood meeting on Monday evening, and they are now all in person. So they had done a lot of hybrid ones, and the mayor was the guest speaker, and she gave her budget address, a shortened version. And other than that, I just want to wish everybody a safe trick or treat. And if you do have to drive, be mindful of little ones walking around because it gets dark very early. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bader.
Thanks, Council President. No comment, no report.
Councilmember Ryan.
Great, thanks. Friendly reminder to everybody that the boards and commissions applications are due on the 4th. So if you're looking for ways to get more involved with the city, recommend joining a board and commission. And also wanted to echo Mayor Franklin's comments about Election Day coming up on Tuesday. Washington has a very safe voting system. Voting by mail is safe and secure. And I just encourage everybody to make sure they get their ballots turned in early so that we can have accurate counts on election night. Thank you.
Councilmember Zarlingo.
Nothing for me.
I'll go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Sorry.
I thank you. I didn't get your name, but I know that you have or lack now a water meter. So I hope that you've given your information to Jennifer and that gets sorted out because that doesn't sound like something you should be going through. And thank you, Ethan. And I have a question about the new Arlington Training Academy. You mentioned Sergeant Morgan, and I can't remember the other person, but I know that we had allowed them to go to the CJTC in Burien. So I'm wondering if they're switching over to Arlington or if this is 2 new staff that are going. How's that working, please?
I just want to make sure I understand your question. It's John DeRusse with the Police Department. Are you asking if the staff that we now have assigned to the Northwest Regional Academy were assigned down to Burien?
No, because I thought we had assigned them to Burien like a year-ish ago.
No, they've been assigned to the creation and all the work that gets done and ramping up a facility. So they've been,
okay.
For example, Lieutenant Morgan had to get his forklift license so he could move stuff around. So there's a lot of planning and prep that goes into it. And we're hoping very soon we'll be able to send officers to that academy. As a part of the agreement, we get 6 officers per academy from Everett. So that gives us a little more ability to get people on the street quicker instead of waiting for an academy in Burien.
Thank you. I remember all of that. I just didn't realize that it was Arlington and not Burien. So thank you.
Yeah.
That's
You're welcome.
all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Vogely. Now it's Councilmember Fosse's turn.
President Schwab. I just wanted to touch base. Last meeting, we had some confusion from some constituents about the different propositions on the ballot and had mentioned that it would be nice to have legal give kind of an update about the nature of the different items that are on the ballot to clarify. Were you
And
planning on?
Ramsey Rammerman is here to answer some of those
Okay,
questions.
I just wanted
and
to
he-
make
yeah,
sure
he'll
that
do
that was still
under city
happening.
attorney comments.
Fantastic, thank you. Other than that, I got to attend recently some trunk or treat events out in the city, and that was pretty fun with all the kiddos and fun costumes out there. And for those who celebrate, happy Halloween in advance.
Okay, excellent. And I don't have any comments tonight, so moving on to administration. Jennifer?
I don't have anything.
Okay. City Attorney David Hall.
No executive session, and as I just mentioned, here is Ramsey Rammerman to respond to council's request for information on the council's role in the initiative process.
Thank you. So I'm going to give a brief overview of the council's role in the initiative process, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. The initiative process is primarily governed by the city charter and secondarily by both state statute and county policy. The charter recognizes two ways in which citizens' initiatives can get on the ballot. First, if an initiative obtains 15% or more of the signatures of voters from the last general election, then that initiative measure is sent to the city council, where the city council either has to adopt it as is or pass a resolution transmitting it to the county. The second method is if an initiative gets more than 5% of the signatures, but less than 15%. In that case, the council's only role is to pass a resolution that transmits the measure to the county. This is a purely administrative task, and the council is not required to take any position on the initiative one way or the other. This requirement of passing the resolution is based on state law, and state law also puts the county in charge of verifying the signatures and gives a deadline for when the council has to pass that resolution that transmits it to the county. State law assigns the task to the city attorney to draft the title, the ballot question, and the brief summary for the initiative. And then finally, under county procedures, either the city or the county can take the job of selecting the 3 members for the pro and 3 members for the con committee, who are then tasked with drafting the language pro-con statements in the voters pamphlet. This last year, we had 3 initiatives. None of them exceeded the 15% threshold. So the council's only role in those 3 initiatives that are going to be on the ballot this week was to pass that administrative resolution transmitting it to the county. And the county was also responsible for selecting the members of the pro and con committees that draft the voter pamphlet statements. So that's a brief overview. Are there more specific questions? I wasn't sure what level of detail you wanted to go into. So,
Councilmember Bader.
Thanks. Great presentation, Ramsey. I don't think it's a question so much as I think when this comes up again, can we immediately connect with the county auditor so that we can help announce the opportunity to write a pro or a con statement? So I think that might have also spoken to the situation that the speaker last week talked about. So, I wasn't aware. I was kind of wondering when we'd hear about that myself as we came up to the date, what the deadline date. But so I don't know if there's any official role we have, but I just wonder if in future situations we could reach out to the county auditor, let us know so we can kind of broadcast that more widely to the community, that there's an opportunity to connect with the county auditor to write the statements. Because frankly, I was kind of watching and I don't recall having seen anything from the county auditor about the opportunity to be, to write those statements. Thanks.
Yeah, certainly as part of the, when the council adopts the resolution, if we get another one transmitting it at that time, you'll know it's going over there. And that, but yeah, we can definitely coordinate with the county to make sure that this gets better promoted. Obviously, someone dropped some ball at some point this year. over there, and we can make sure we take a more proactive step. We have been working on internal procedures to capture everything we learned from this last year, and ultimately we'll put something together for the website so that citizens at least get an overview of the process. But we'll make sure we include that as well to make sure that we're, making sure the council can express its voice even on that issue, even if it doesn't want to take actual position on the initiatives.
Thank you. Councilmember Fosse.
And just to break it down, clarity wise, council was not taking a position on any of these initiatives. When we had to vote, it was purely administrative and they were mandatory.
Correct. It was
Yes.
something that was mandatory done. If we hadn't done it, someone could get a mandamus to force you guys to do it.
Yes.
But it was purely administrative. It was not at all on the merits on any of the 3 initiatives.
Thank you.
No more questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. City Attorney David Hall, anything else?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, on to our consent items. We have items 1 through 6. Do I have a motion?
Councilmember Bader moves the consent items.
Second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Tui,
Yes.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan.
Yes.
Councilmember Zarlingo,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
Councilmember Fosse,
Yes.
President Schwab.
Yes, okay, I'm moving on to item number 7, proposed action item. This is second reading, Council Bill 24110-28. Are there any questions? Councilman Run.
Thank you. I don't have a question, but I did want to thank Ethan for his comments earlier and to also add to them in response to Councilmember Bader's questions last week. Since last week, I went to the Department of Labor and Industries list of wage theft violations. It's a really easy search. You can search by UBI number, by city, by zip code, and I search for Everett, and it pulled up 12 pages of wage theft violations in Everett, maybe not incorporated Everett, but Mail Everett, MAIL. And it was all types of businesses, retail businesses. And so I think to me, it showed just how prevalent it is in our community. And these are just the wage theft incidences that had been reported. And many times wage theft goes unreported because a person feels vulnerable and they don't feel like they are in a safe space that they can report a wage theft violation. So thank you again, Ethan, for sharing those numbers with us earlier. I wanted to give a reminder that the 2 spreadsheets that he mentioned are 2 of at least 10 just in the laborer's trade. And then that's replicated across all different trades. So just that small snippet of the example is actually a very small portion of the larger problem of wage theft in our community. And to me, I see it as that there wouldn't be a need for wage theft legislation if wage theft didn't exist. So to strengthen our city's approach to wage theft violators is responsible governance and meant to protect the workers in our community. So hopefully that helps answer the question. I'd be happy to do more research if necessary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the third and final reading will be November 6th. Okay, moving on to item number 8, Council Bill 24110-29. This is the second reading. So are there any questions? Comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to our action item, item number 9. Adopt resolution declaring property located at 1301 Lombard as a surplus and establishing procedures for its sale and disposition. Councilmember Fosse.
I would like to consider discussing this and potentially making a motion to move this in 2 weeks. We have our Built Environment Committee. Because going through the resolution, it does outline that what the resolution provides. And there are particular elements already listed in there. And given our discussion that we had previously on the process and council wanting to review this and be involved in it a little bit more in detail and utilize our committees, the zoning wasn't held up, but perhaps the details of this can be reviewed more thoroughly and have council feedback and involvement in some of the resolution, or at least some of the disposition terms.
Okay.
And-
oh,
And,
I'm
and I
sorry.
was going to make a motion, but I wanted to check in with council members if it might be, before we go through the kind of official motion of that, to discuss whether it's putting this resolution there or just talking about the disposition document. I think that the resolution in the detail that it goes in and how it does outline things would be valuable to go to the Built Environment Committee. But I was kind of interested in what my colleagues think. And it's 2 weeks, it's in 2 weeks is the meeting, it sounds like. And I'm not interested in holding up the project. It's more of the throwing it to the committees and utilizing those.
Okay, well, before we go further comment, how about we have a briefing first? Is that possible? Or are you just here for questions?
Yeah, we can start there.
Yeah.
Mayor Franklin, Council President Schwab, council members, Scott Pattison staff. Last week you approved the rezone of 1301 Broadway, 1301 Lombard, allowing up to 16 homes to be developed and sold to a private developer. Today, we are here requesting the next step in the process, approval to designate the property as surplus. If approved, the city will obtain an appraisal and list the property with a licensed real estate broker on an open market, ensuring an open and competitive process. As discussed in previous meetings, the property disposition agreement will include design standards in line with the Donovan District with regards to aesthetics and guidelines. If multiple proposals are received, the developer selection will consider not only the proposed purchase price, but also factors such as experience to build, financial capacity, anticipated start date, and a commitment to promote owner-occupied units with the opportunity for first-time home buyers. Most of that is currently in the disposition. So Councilmember Fossey, did you have some other items you would like to consider adding to the disposition?
So the way that this is currently written, it does outline a variety of elements that are in the disposition. It is up to my colleagues. Either way, I think the disposition at a minimum should go to council because I do not think it should just purely be a council has the authority to reject or approve, but be in the involvement of what those qualifications are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And given that it's not a month out from now, it's only 2 weeks is the next built environment. And I'm not even on the Built Environment Committee, but I think that that practice of involving the committees as they are purposed for is a good standard to begin. And I originally was thinking that this resolution should go there first in outlining the elements of what the disposition would include. But maybe you can clarify on if we approve the resolution with these already dictated elements, and then it goes to the Built Environment to discuss more of the details of it, I am okay with that as well. I want it to be something that's not a difficult, like extended process, but I do think that we need to have, at least at this point, council involvement in some of those stipulations.
Right. City Attorney Hall, if we were to approve the surplus today, could we edit the disposition in the coming weeks?
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
Okay.
Good point. Thank you. Is it MR for now?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, is that something where I need to motion to amend this, that the disposition then will go to the committee?
No, we're happy to schedule that conversation for the committee agenda. We don't, as long as there's consensus from the actual committee members, those two.
Well, we'll clear that in a minute. So
yeah.
we got Jennifer's opinion real quickly, didn't we? Councilmember Zarlingo, we'll get back to you. Thank you. Yeah.
Councilmember Ryan and I are co-chairs of that committee, and I spoke very briefly with, sorry?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Councilmember Vogel. We are co-chairs of a different committee. I guess I got those swapped. And I spoke very briefly with Councilmember Fossey. A process in the future to send that to that committee makes good sense to me. I concur on that. I am, and I'm especially relevant the question about bringing it to the committee with a chance to make some amendments if necessary or some suggestions. I'm also mindful of the process in this and the city's funds tied up in this property and wanting to move this along as quickly as possible, also to get housing out there as quickly as possible. So if you have any particular feedback on the timing of this, I would be inclined to go ahead with the surplus decision with the caveat that we'll bring it before the committee, raise any other questions, and then discuss those at council. But I also would say that the conditions have been informally brought to us over time and discussed by you as well. So I think this is one of those process things that we can probably improve that way, though I certainly have been paying attention to these conditions and am in favor of them as proposed so far.
Yeah, so point of order there from our city attorney. If we approve this today and then in 2 weeks, we decided that we wanted to change some conditions, would that be 3 readings again?
Well, this is just a resolution,
Okay.
so you don't have 3 readings.
Oh, okay, that's right. Sorry. All right. So we could approve additional amendments to
An
it.
amendment, or you could put off approving it and then approve it as you refine it after your committee meeting, either way.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Ryan was first. and then-
Okay. I had the same questions and met with Tim Benedict this last week, and it's my understanding that today's resolution is approving the process. The property disposition agreement is a separate approval, a standalone approval by council at a future date. Sale is a standalone process by council. So the resolution today is just setting the process. It's not setting the content of each of the elements that are listed. So I do think that the property disposition agreement should go to a committee for full input. I would like to see that to have full council input at some point, if that could just be a discussion item at a future council meeting. I do have a number of things I would like to have included. I'm not on the built environment committee, but just wanted to hopefully help clarify that process within the process that we'd be approving today.
In terms of keeping this on track, taking action tonight would set that in motion.
And it wouldn't be binding us to a draft of a property disposition agreement that we haven't seen yet.
Correct.
Councilmember Vogler, you had your mic on for a sec.
Yes, thank you. I am very glad for that clarity because it was quite not clear. And I'm more than happy to have an open and robust conversation about the property disposition agreement at the Built Environment Committee. And there's no time like the present then to actually work on improving processes, because this isn't going to happen very often. And I certainly don't want it to be a Seattle Safeway brick color discussion. I think it's more than that. If anybody, thank you. We're not going down that route. But so if the property disposition agreement is actually going to be discussed about this particular property and then voted on later, that's good enough for me.
Councilmember Fosse.
So on here, it does say that in this resolution, the property disposition agreement will contain a covenant that will, among other items, require that the purchaser developer project of the property be a townhouse project with a maximum of 16 townhouse units. So it does designate specifically on here what it will be, not may. It was at the conversation that you had, Councilmember Ryan, with the specifics of the disposition.
Yes, but those, the specific wording of the property disposition agreement would come to us at a later date for approval.
But the resolution does state that that is what it's going to be. It's going to be townhouses. It's going to be up to 16 townhouses. It does stipulate that on here as it's not an optional. The resolution states that that's what it is going to be.
Well, I think that's all in line with what the code would allow for.
Okay, and
zoning code.
So I guess for a point of order, we can change it later, even if the statement says, Councilman.
I
That's one of
think
the questions
This
we're
sets
having.
kind of a minimum that this is what will happen. And then the disposition agreement can add the kind of design elements that people are concerned about. Is that consistent, Councilmember Ryan, with your discussions?
Asked him.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if this is just a resolution, we can change it with one meeting.
Sure, you can amend a resolution at any time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to call
Yeah,
on.
a resolution isn't binding in the same way as an ordinance.
Yeah, I just
So
want,
a resolution is simply, you're resolving that we are declaring the surplus, and then all the details that you want to discuss in the Built Environment Committee can happen in that committee. And it can be a resolution isn't really binding in the same way as other things that council votes on.
that's why I wanted to clarify that we didn't have to have like 3 readings and delay the whole process and change this very quickly.
I think I can fix any issue I have with this by just changing will into say may, and that would just cover our bases.
Okay.
Is that, can I make
You
a
can make a
motion to
motion.
just amend it to say may instead
Okay,
of will?
motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Do we have comment or questions on the amendment? Okay,
Yeah.
Councilmember
Real
Bader.
quick, where's the may? Sorry. In the-
It says the property disposition agreement will contain
Gotcha.
a covenant that will, among other items. If we just change it to may, I think it gives us that flexibility. It very well might end up being exactly this, but just to give us that flexibility and for expediency, changing that, I think solves the debate that I have.
Okay,
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan.
So but that's on the cover sheet.
It's on the whole thing. It's,
Okay, Councilmember Vogely.
sorry for
No, that's
my-
right. No, it's good. No, we're just trying to,
I mean, it says a resolution declaring property located at 1301 Lombard as surplus and establishing procedures for its sale and disposition. But then it whereas is all of the things that shall be in the property disposition agreement, and then therefore's
Sorry, I think we should just-
therefore's all the words.
well, at this point, whether it's will or shall, we can still do a resolution for the details. And I would expect that now, since we've had this discussion, to be in 2 weeks. So but there is a motion on and an amended with a
Yeah.
second.
Sorry.
So any more comments on I'm going to try to keep procedures here on the amendment.
Council President Schwab,
Oh, yes, thank you. I would want to call on you.
I had that sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I just clarify that amendment is to section 2D? That's the part that talks about will contain a covenant. So it's those 2 wills in section 2D become may. Thanks.
Good point of clarification. Is that
I accept that clarification as a seconder.
okay? All right, yes. Thank you. Okay, on the amendment, clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Tui,
No.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan. Yes. Vice President Zarlingo,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
Councilmember Fosse.
Yes.
President Schwab.
Yes, okay. Do we have any more questions from our presenter from administration on this resolution, item number 9?
I have none.
Anyone?
I have
Okay.
none.
Questions from, okay. All right, item number 9 is before us. Clerk,
Oh,
please.
sorry,
Yeah,
one more.
okay.
So
Councilmember Ryan.
did we come to a commitment that the property disposition agreement will go to committee for discussion?
I did. I
Okay.
made that commitment,
Thank you.
and my expectation is that we'll rule on disposition, whatever changes, if we can, that meeting,
I would
or as soon as
just
planned.
like to reserve the opportunity to talk with other staff members and the committee chairs about whether it is a conversation that takes place at an official committee, or if maybe it's an executive session element.
Okay, well, if that's,
Or not, I don't
if
know.
that's
I'm
the
just
request of the administration and
I
it
would
meets the
just-
definition, it
hadn't
can absolutely be done.
contemplated it until several minutes ago,
Okay.
so just,
Well, at this point, where our expectation is we'll bring it up in the committee, at least some form of discussion on it.
yeah,
Okay,
makes sense.
thank you. Councilmember Ryan.
Thank you. I would expect that the committee would then provide a recommendation to full council of what a final or near final resolution would read.
Yeah, and I would too. Thank you. Councilmember Vogel.
Let the record show that I shook my head in a no when hearing about executive session and private conversations.
Okay, well, only if it meets the legal requirement. Councilmember Fosse.
I am confused by what we just decided on and Jennifer's feedback. So we are still under agreement that this disposition is then going to committee. And then committee will review it, provide a recommendation. We will still have a chance to amend and make any changes to it when it comes back to council. Committee will discuss it. I don't understand what the reference
It
was
will
with the.
It will go to committee unless there's something that legally requires us to have a separate conversation in executive session. Otherwise, absolutely, we are very happy to have you discuss it in committee because we hadn't had the opportunity to think about what might come up. I think Jennifer Gregerson just wanted to make sure that you were aware if we had to come to you in an executive session or in full council for some reason as instead of committee, we would do that. But regardless, you as a council will be authoring the disposition or whatever the agreement is called. That is, you have our commitment and agreement here in this public meeting. We just needed to clarify with the staff that are involved in this process to make sure there's not some other step that we have to take.
Okay, at this point before us, we have item number 9 that's been amended. And the intent is we did change some words to shall to will.
Clarification.
And then to may, thank you. And then will to may, and then the intent is to bring it up 2 weeks in committee. And then also.
Point of clarification
Okay.
on what the mayor just said. You said instead of committee. Can I clarify that you mean like in addition to committee?
In addition to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll finish. So the intent is that we're going to bring it to committee in 2 weeks with further recommendations. And that's when we'll put it in the shalls or the wills versus may. Okay? All right, clerk, please take.
We still need a motion and a second.
We did have we did have a motion and a second already and amended.
So that was on the amendment.
Okay, yeah, I am. I was gonna.
Yes, so I'll move the resolution as amended with the word may.
Oh, thank you.
Second.
All right. Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Tui,
Yes.
Councilmember Bader,
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan. Yes. Vice President Zarlingo.
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
Councilmember Fosse,
Yes.
President Schwab.
Yes, and I look forward to more discussion on this. Thank you. All right, now we have briefing item number 10, South Everett Economic Development Strategy Plan Update. Council member or administrator. Oh, he's already up here.
Yes, we have an economic
Okay.
development director,
Welcome.
Ernest, and some consultants that will be joining us via the Zoom link.
Okay, how many do we have?
We have 3.
Three online? Okay, and they can all turn their cameras on now? Thank you. Welcome.
Council members, Council President Schwab. Nice to be here. My name is Dan Ernest. I'm the Economic Development Director. It seems like I have to reintroduce myself. It's been a while since I've presented. I am very happy to provide you with an in-process update on the South Everett Economic Development Study that we've been working on along with members of the Eco Northwest team. They will do the lion's share of the presentation today, and Corinne will be leading that and leading the, sharing his screen for the presentation. So the members are 2 members of the Eco Northwest, which is a West Coast consulting firm, highly respected throughout Washington and Oregon, especially where it was started and now is extending down to California. Corinne is sharing from the Portland office and Morgan is here in the Seattle office. Tina Velocity with LISC is also part of that team that was assembled to do just a great job. This study was funded by ARPA funds that that you appropriated some time ago, and it's been basically since January that we've been working together with this team and anticipate a final product at the end of this year. So with that, I will just ask Corinne to advance to the scope of the study, which is South Everett. And the way we ended up defining South Everett was, I will just use roads for markers. On the east side, I-5, on the north side, SR 526 or the Boeing Freeway, depending on what you like to call it. On the west side, Airport Road, and on the south side, basically 128th as it extends over to Airport Road. And you'll see from that we included some of the area that is in our urban growth area, but not yet incorporated into the city. And we just felt like, that was appropriate because those neighborhoods share a lot of the same experience and built out environment. And B, it was appropriate because it made the data collection easier because of the census tracts. And C, that's an area that in the future we may be considering as an annexation area. Councilmember Vogel?
As a point of, I love seeing their faces. It's like they're here. So I noticed that their faces went away, but if their faces could come back, that would be fantastic.
I think it makes the screen smaller.
Okay. The 4 areas, we're going to slide through a lot of information very quickly. But the 4 areas of real focus are inclusive growth for all residents, pathways for high wage employment. We want to address and mitigate, if possible, for the potential displacement, especially those caused by transit expansion in the area. Although, as we all know, displacement and so forth are happening with or without that. And then finally, to explore opportunities to optimize the public land, especially the city's property, for equitable development. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Corinne. I'll be here, and it probably will be easier to ask questions at the end of the presentation just because it is virtual. But before I turn it over, Councilmember Zarlingo, you have a...
Well, one quick point, I guess, that makes sense to raise relevant to what you said is the selection area. Something massively affecting this will be the light rail that's coming, in particular circling that area, or at least going around the west, the southwest and north sides of that area. So I guess in that sense, I want to kind of reinforce that it makes sense for us to be planning to this, even if it wasn't an urban growth boundary, because there's that nexus between what transit is doing and what we're trying to plan here, and displacement and gentrification and development and all these things. So I think it's really important that we be including that area.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Great. Council member, you may be reading from my notes. I'm Morgan Shook. I'm a director at Echo Northwest. I'm joined by my colleague Corinne Saucedo and Tina Vlassi from LISC. And
Is there a way we can increase the volume? Sorry to interrupt. It's really
no
hard
worries.
to hear you.
How if I get a little closer? Is that better?
Barely. Sorry.
No. Tina, Corinne, can you hear me okay? Or is it a council? Okay.
We can hear you.
We can hear you better now.
Better now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, I was just saying that thank you very much for having us here today. We have a short presentation that we'll move through quickly. It has some detail in there, but I'm sure you've had a chance to take a look at that. Just quickly, just to give you a timeline on this project, we started back in January. We've been doing a lot of data analysis just to get our bearings on the area. Tina and her team at LISC have been leading a very robust community engagement process that we can talk a little more about. And now here we are in late October. Over the last couple months, we've been working with Dan to develop a set of big picture goals that he illuminated, as well as a range of specific strategies that nest into some important domains that I think council member you already noted. And so before I turn it over to Corinne, he's going to walk through a little bit of the existing conditions work. We'll talk a little bit about some of the results of the community engagement, and then we'll end talking about kind of how we're thinking about the strategies. But I think the departure point here is really one of change. One in terms of how we've understood this area in South Everett, both from a governance perspective, but also from a social, economic, and cultural perspective. And we'll go through some of that documentation. But I think the short note of it is the area is marked by change in terms of sort of particularly around who is living there today, and how that is alike and slightly different than maybe other communities in the Everett vicinity. But I think particularly as we think about sort of the role that some of these large scale investments brokered by investments in transit, mobility, as well as economic development are likely to transform the area over the next coming decades. And so doing this analysis now, trying to think about places where we can help accelerate positive change and pay attention to some effects that may not be desired is really timely. So we're looking forward to taking your questions at the end. Corinne, I'll turn it over to you to kind of walk us through some of the highlights in the data.
Sounds good. Thanks, Morgan and Dan. Yeah, this won't be a long presentation, and just to be clear here, we're about 70-80% done. This was an opportunity for you all to give us some feedback prior to the completion of this, just so we make sure we're kind of well aligned with what you all think is most relevant to what the city can do. So we'll start off by just talking about some of the data points. Some of these you'll probably know already, but always kind of helpful to kind of connect the dots here for folks. But in this area, the area that Dan noted at the beginning, based on census data, the things to kind of note in this slide, we're kind of comparing it with the rest of the city and then the county. This area has a higher percentage of renter occupied homes compared to the rest of the city and the county. So up to 64% of folks are renting around there versus 36% who are in owner occupied homes. That's quite a bit of a discrepancy from the city and the county. And the per capita income is a little bit lower there than you see overall with the city. It has a more diverse population than the rest of the city and the county, and predominantly folks of a Latino background, which some of these things I think to keep in the back of your mind are related to workforce, and housing is kind of where we're going with a lot of these. So for example, on this slide, we're talking about age, education. So 40% almost of the population is sort of that prime working age of between 18 and 39. Not to say we're all not working much past 39, we all are, but I think this is an area that I think there's a real opportunity to get folks who are a little bit younger in that their trajectory on some stronger paths in terms of wage growth. So it is a little bit less education that we're seeing compared to some other parts of the city and the county. So that's just giving you kind of a backdrop. Other things to keep in mind, unemployment rate's a little bit higher than other parts of the city. This is pretty interesting. The folks who are in this area, based on sort of the data we have, a smaller percentage working in manufacturing. You can see there on the left compared to the right with Everett overall. And I think that's particularly ironic or interesting as we get into sort of the proximity of some of that industrial areas. What we're seeing are a lot more people working in services, in retail. Obviously, that's sort of an easier access point for a lot of folks. And as you can see in this slide, To the left, that blue is industrial buildings. So the size of that circle is based on the square footage of a building. To the right, at least on my screen, is the green here is retail. So you really have a tale of two parts of this area, one being much more industrial, the other side being much more retail. And folks who live here are working much more in that green belt there on Evergreen than they are in the blue area. So it's, we think, an opportunity to shift people a little bit broader in terms of what their employment tracks could be. Shifting over to housing, the average rent is lower, but not as low as if you were to purchase a home. So that's sort of an interesting contrast in terms of if you're trying to buy a home, this is a more affordable place to get in. But if you're renting, this is a little cheaper, but not as cheap as you might think. So that to the left there in this chart, you're seeing the actual rental rates on multifamily. It's been going up pretty consistently. That orange again is South Everett. For the last 10 years, it's lower than that darker green, that Everett. But it's still gone up consistently over the last 10 years. And as I mentioned earlier, there's quite a few people who are renting in this area. Almost 2/3 of the people living here are renting. And then based on our numbers, just under half of Everett households are cost burden. They're paying more than 30% of their income on housing. There is a fair amount of what we call naturally occurring affordable housing in this area, those yellow circles here, which is great. And I think this kind of reflects what you've seen in terms of this being an opportunity area for a lot of folks who are trying to find more affordable places to live. But there are some pressures, as you brought up earlier, whether that's transit or not. This is an example, Center Point Greens, not uncommon. You'll see, someone purchased this. This happened this year, took 186 unit multifamily and is doing updates and doing some nice amenities that does increase the rent premium. So that is sort of a reflection on some of the pressures that are happening within that existing stock that is not controlled by fixed affordable housing. And we just haven't seen a lot of other projects adding new housing to this area. In terms of the assets you have in this area, this is to the left, a lot of different colors is just publicly controlled land. And to the right is really just what the city owns. So just a reflection back on what kind of tools you have when it comes to that housing question, but also the economic development question in terms of what do you control? What could you actually start to contemplate if you want to be more proactive in looking at additional housing? So I'll pause there. Those sort of our baseline sort of data points that I think are perhaps more relevant as we get into some of these other themes. Morgan, is there anything I missed or you wanted to highlight?
No, I think that's really good. I think maybe let's go through some of the feedback on the community engagement side. Let Tina offer any other additional thoughts, and then we can tie things up and move to Q&A quickly.
Sounds good. So what we heard again, they're primarily focus groups. We had one that was just looking at workforce development entities in the area and in the region. Strong demand for upskilling. Automation is taking a larger role within manufacturing. They'd love to see more sort of on-the-job training, but they are kind of working closer with a lot of these entities that they're providing great services when it comes to trainings. We heard a little bit that some of those trainings and some of those folks are not reaching some Latino population. So there's a little bit of how are you kind of making sure that everyone understands where those trainings are, how to access them. And then some considerations moving forward when it comes to workforce. The city perhaps is a convener or a connector. We're not suggesting that the city takes an active role in providing workforce training, but perhaps as a convener, as an example, after we had this great focus group, the day after we heard that two of the folks who are providing workforce training were going to go in on a grant. So sometimes just bringing people together can help to really spark some more activity in this area. Shifting gears to some of the small business assistance. So Tina at Lisk and some of the folks she works with were actually going out, talking to people at their place of business, and collected some of the feedback we heard there. Some public safety issues regarding vandalism, break-ins, but overall very supportive business community that really values kind of each other, but is a little more informal in those relationships. And then some of the needs that are out there, whether it's access to capital, helping kind of figure out permitting and such. Some considerations would be a little more organizing around some of those businesses, whether that's what's called a BID, a business improvement district, or a CDC, to be something that would actually take on programs or services themselves, or a merchant association or a chamber that could be that conduit for resource providers to really help people learn about business growth, legal assistance, et cetera. So some good feedback there. Shifting gears into what we're calling inclusive development. This was kind of circling back to that idea of housing need and what assets are there. Clearly, the backdrop here is a little bit of the market shifts, already seeing pressures, and then the potential of even accelerated shifts if these or when the transit stations were to come into this area in particular. How could you get ahead of that? So there's already a housing need. There are some assets in the area, some public land the city controls that maybe could be tweaked or reconfigured to allow a little more density in the area, and perhaps activate a little more green space that would be accessible to residents. And some considerations would be sort of moving this process along into more urban planning or station area planning if it is in connection with some of those transit changes. The other area that is a little exciting and more traditional economic development is some of the innovation companies that are scattered in this area in those industrial zones, whether that's sustainable aviation fuels or some of the nuclear companies that are setting up shop and using some of those larger spaces to do some really cool business experimentation and growth. What we heard from them is that there's clearly a strong benefit to being close to Payne Field or Boeing. They kind of like those spaces. Sometimes workforce recruitment can be a challenge. They appreciate working with the city, but there have been some feedback on slow permitting. Some of these companies are really trying to expand pretty quickly. So while they appreciate the changes that have already been done in terms of streamlining those permitting, there's always a desire for that process to be even quicker, or at least more feedback. And then the chance of maybe building a more innovation ecosystem, whether that is city assistance, tailored incentives, or kind of R&D sectors, or kind of getting some of those employers to be advocacy partners at the state level. So I'll pause here. We got 2 quick slides. So again, kind of try wrapping this together. Morgan, if you want, I can sort of pull these ones back, or.
Mayor?
Yeah, no, I think.
We got a question or a comment from the mayor?
I just want a quick comment. I'm not gonna be able to stay for the full presentation because I have another meeting, but I do want to comment on the permitting. We have made some very significant investments and improvements in our permitting process. We've added staffing, we've moved online. So a lot of, and I know that some of this data gets collected prior to some of those being fully implemented. So I just wanted to stress that, because we have a team of people in planning and public works and the mayor's office that have been invested in this area. So just if that comes up in questions, and I'm no longer here to reiterate that. Thank you.
And we've maintained the budget in this area for the proposed budget?
Yeah, there have been no cuts there in permitting whatsoever. In fact, we've made additions over the last months.
Okay, thank you. All right, go ahead. Thank you for the presentation.
Let us just finish up here quickly with the last couple slides, and then we can move to Q&A. But I think, as in any good strategy, right, we want to pay attention to kind of what we think the big opportunities are, where the big obstacles may be. But I think in the sense, when we step back and we look at this, we see, right, such great sort of human, social, and economic capital in play. And if we are drawing trend lines, the trend lines are all mostly pointing in the right direction. And so the strategy then is, as we start thinking about, let's go to the next slide, is really about trying to do two things. One, be comprehensive in terms of the types of things that we should be prescribing that will drive positive outcomes in the area. And two, that we should be very specific with the types of things that can be done, particularly under the city control. And so what we want to provide to you for your feedback is really how we think about where that kind of comprehensiveness aligns. And the way we're formulating this is that there is a sort of economic workforce development tier, there is a small business tier, there is an inclusive development tier, and then there's a tier specifically looking at the innovation economy. And when Dan charged us with this over a year ago, or well, I guess less than a year ago, he really wanted to say, give us a work plan that staff can execute on. So in each one of these sort of tiers, we want to actually have a specific type of strategy that is meant to drive wages, drive wealth generation, drives the affordability of housing, and drives the diversification of employment and worker incomes in this area. And that's at the phase that we're at right now, is building out those specific actions that will drive those outcomes for the city and for the residents living in the area. So with that, I'll go ahead and pause. And Dan, if we can probably take that down, Corinne, and we can Dan, maybe you can help facilitate any questions from the council.
Okay, thank you. Questions, council? Councilmember Zarlingo.
Well, two things. As somebody who rented at a couple of different spots in this zone for over a decade, I'm acutely aware of the concerns about housing. And I've heard the term a number of times, naturally occurring affordable housing. So I looked around at it and I find that it's used a little bit differently by different people. Can you give me a quick summary of what you mean by that?
Yeah, so the way we think about it is affordability as defined in terms of cost burdening, but particularly in the realm that there aren't sort of strong public controls on the income qualification for people living in those things. So basically, when we think about the public side, right, we have the nonprofits that are building projects with primarily LIHTC dollars and other dollars funded by the state and local agencies that provide, basically buildings that should be affordable in perpetuity. A lot of that is designed to be at the lower incomes. The city has policies like the MFTE, which are targeting kind of more moderate income, but those have explicit controls on them. And then there are other kind of other subsidies that go right to renters, like Section 8 vouchers and such, where policy folks are taking it. So when we say naturally occurring, we mostly mean that side of the marketplace that isn't formally regulated, but because of whether it's quantity, quality, that housing can be offered at a lower price point that is more affordable to the people and the incomes that they have that are living in them.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's helpful, especially I'm trying to discipline myself when I talk about these things to our community members, that I have that clear in my head, because if you're an insider in this, it's hard sometimes to understand what other people don't understand.
If I could add just a response to what Morgan said, just as an example, along Casino Road, many of those apartment complexes, there's quite a bit of density along there already, lots of housing. A lot of those are quote unquote market rate, that they are simply for-profit businesses that own these properties, and they're just getting what the market will bear. A lot of time that's a decision by the property owner of whether to upgrade those facilities because they feel like there's a market who are willing to pay more. And in that setting, a lot of landowners have decided, no, we're not going to upgrade. We're just going to keep the rents low and continue to offer them at a relatively affordable price when you look at the entire county and where it is. The problem with that is that if there is a market that can afford more, the incentive on the private side is to upgrade and to raise rents. And so the nonprofit affordable housing providers forego that incentive of the profit incentive because they have it in their mission statement to continue to provide an affordable rent. Most affordable housing providers, though, will not go into an area of relative low income because their mission also says we want to put our projects throughout the city, you know, and actually make a diversity of housing in different areas. So if you talk to Everett Housing Authority or someone like that, they typically wouldn't target an area with low rent or low income because there's plenty of affordable housing there already. But we're looking 10 years in advance when light rail comes and say, oh, it would be really strategic if some of the Everett housing authorities, for example, could purchase what is now a market-driven affordable housing project. And so then it becomes in perpetuity affordable. Otherwise, we just anticipate the market growth, not only from population in Puget Sound region, but add a couple light rail stations. And now these projects will get redeveloped or reworked to be much more unaffordable for the area. Does that help?
Yeah, that does, because one of the things I've been involved with light rail have been acutely aware of also is how those large forces are coming in, and they're coming in before the light rail is ever really going to be here. I mean,
right.
People are looking ahead. This is real estate. It's long-term decisions. And that does connect with my second question, and I think my last one here for this. It's something that I think you've commented about, and our planning director, Yorick Stevens-Wajda, has commented about before, and that is affordable commercial space, because one of the other displacements there, and at least as I understand it from previous comments, that there are protections for affordable housing, but not generally protections for affordable commercial space. And I guess that's one of the things I would see as something I'll watch for in this kind of development, because that's an area where displacement there really could be difficult, and where there are some positive opportunities as well. So I guess I'm going to pay more attention to that. And just to say, if I'm misunderstanding the lack of protections for affordable commercial space, let me know.
They're much more rare. And I'm going to turn it over to Tina to
I would love to say a couple things about that for sure. Thanks, Dan. Thanks so much for that question. I think it's one of the things, if I'll just spend like a minute talking about displacement and gentrification, because that really was one of the core tenets of this scope of work, was really thinking about equitable opportunities for wealth generation and participation in economic opportunities. And we know that the local community in South Everett is not necessarily connected to the incredible job opportunities that are like literally right in their neighborhood. So that's definitely been one part of what we think about. And when we think about the infrastructure investments that are coming, especially with light rail, as you mentioned, we have to think about displacement, not just of like people from the housing standpoint, but also institutions like, churches, also like, so cultural institutions, and then places of commerce. And we know that there's many small businesses that are really critical to the population, especially the Latino population that lives in that neighborhood. And so LISC in this work and in other work we're doing is really thinking about how do we get ahead of those forces. We know we won't be able to completely mitigate them, but how do we work with the community and create institutions that help to support the preservation of the folks who want to stay in the neighborhood, who live there now and want to be a part of that community, and affordable commercial space, and looking at where we can make sure to retain some of those legacy businesses as a really important factor for that. And so I think that's some of the work we're thinking about in terms of mixed use development, where there could be retail space on the ground floor that could be owned and managed by nonprofits that could create affordable space. There's also the potential for community ownership of commercial property, where the community comes together to steward that property. So I think there's a variety of tools, and there's you're correct. There's not the same kinds of regulatory incentives around that. And so I think it's something that we will continue to explore and just really appreciate your interest. And so we should continue talking about, where there are policy opportunities to be able to enable that.
Yeah, in particularly anything that you have found in your broader experience than ours that has worked. I'm always interested in that because it's tough to see in advance.
Yeah, for sure.
Councilmember Vogely?
Thank you. I also wanted to add on to naturally occurring affordable housing also is typically unhealthy for the people living there. And that's why, we said that the owners of properties don't necessarily want to renovate and make things better. It's not, in my opinion, because they want to keep rents low for the goodness of our community, but it's too expensive. And then they also, it will then not be affordable. It may be healthy for the people living there now, but it won't be affordable anymore. So, and I also heard you mentioned bringing in, housing authorities. We have the Everett Housing Authority. They have a lot on their plate. So I'm hoping also that, not sure how legally it works, but possibly the HASCO Housing Authority of Snohomish County, multiple forces of nonprofit developers to go into the low income areas that we're talking about and work together to make not only affordable housing, but healthy housing. And I might be getting a parking ticket soon.
And I have a question, and it goes along, really what's going to most likely be a redevelopment of this area. There isn't a lot of vacant land, and I don't know if there's a will to use parkland or green space to increase density. So how does that process work? And is there something that this group can, besides the zoning, is that really we're stuck to? Is there anything else that we can,
we definitely
address the issue? Yeah.
Right. And shortly after I came here in 2019 at the council retreat, we talked about Walter E. Hall and the fact that it will be basically surrounded by light rail stations, and how that could be a strategic location. And that is definitely something that is being looked at initially. The actual feasibility study that would be required for getting, I would say, to a level of council real activity as far as zoning or anything like that goes is probably some years away. But it is definitely something that we're looking at, because as Corinne pointed out in one of the slides, that is one of the assets that the city has that could be very strategic in this whole conversation.
And then the second question I have was based on the map. I see a lot of the area that we're studying is not in the city limits of Everett. So is it this group's recommendation that we look at annexation or working with the county or both? If you can make a comment on that.
Yeah, I won't speak for my consultants quite yet, but I'll just say that it definitely is a conversation we've had. Similar to the Walter E. Hall, is one that requires a lot more work than they're prepared to do as far as the cost benefit analysis and the kind of the overall philosophy of whether or not that's advisable or not. But I think that from our conversations, it's definitely something that should be considered because of you saw public safety, for example. I'll just use one example. Public safety was one of the things we heard from the small business owners and also many of the residents as being a concern. Right now, this one area, which functions in many ways very, it's got a lot of the same problems and the same issues and the same development standards. There's no big topography separating or anything. There's just a line on some maps that separate it. And yet that line on those maps mean that Snohomish County patrols part of it and Everett Police patrols the other part. And that creates I don't know, problems is overstated, but it just create inefficiencies, I guess, in how those things are addressed. And so that might be one area that the council decides, yeah, this is something that we want to help fix. And so that would be one of the questions about annexation. I think that would have to be considered. I think probably our consultants are just getting to the level of, yeah, you should really consider this as a possibility.
Thank you. Councilmember Bader.
Thanks, Council President. Yeah, intriguing thing here, right? Well, one thing I'd ask if it's possible in the near term to see, is there a similar map of naturally occurring affordable commercial space for this area? My suspicion is we're going to see some of the same thing. Already we have naturally occurring affordable commercial space in this area to a great degree. And if that's the case, what does this study get us or do for us? Second, it seems like a lot of the on the map, look at the assets, city-owned, kind of segueing from Council President Schwab's comment there, that almost all the city-owned properties either park or wetland, with the exception of the library and the police station. So not quite sure what that information does for us. I like the idea of working with the county. If we had an opportunity to expand the study a little bit, that area just south of 128th, very similar to north of 128th, also slated for light rail, also in the city's UGA, just north of Lake Stickney. I know that's not quite, the census tract boundaries aren't clean there, but it's so similar, and since it's in the city's UGA. And finally, a question here: what would we, aside from looking at property assets, what are there ideas or things that would be done uniquely in this area that just wouldn't affect the whole city in the first place? I mean, small business support, innovation economy, safe environment, reducing hurdles for high growth companies, et cetera. It seems like all those things are things we want to be doing for the whole city anyway. And even if we didn't want to, how you would parse those just for this area, I struggle with understanding how that would happen.
I'll let, who wants to answer that one first?
I can jump in and say one thing, which is just that our part of the premise of this work is that this part of Everett has been under-resourced and underinvested for some time. And that the businesses, especially because there's a very strong percentage of folks who are newcomers to the country, have many more challenges in accessing the kinds of small business supports. And so I think that, the idea is just to be able to say, like, we know this community has been generally underserved, and what are the kinds of investments and kind of access and programs that we need to put together to ensure that they're participating equally in the opportunities that are coming. I'll let Cran and Morgan kind of comment further. That's the perspective I bring.
Yeah, I think that the general notion is right. So if I understand the question, like, what will be specific to this area? And I think that there's kind of two ways we look at it. There are things that the city's currently already doing that just need better, or not better, we'll just say focal points given the change in situation that's happening, right? The investment in light rail, the nature of the business community that Tina just articulated, that we'll want to pay particular attention to. And then I think there are wholly things that are about the community that you would do, that we would be thinking about doing something different on. I think the Walter Hall Park idea is something that is different, right? That's something that the city has not contemplated, much the region, and would be a constellation of lots of different kinds of economic, real estate, community development activities centered in a very place-based investment. So I think as where we are today, it's really thinking about the strategies twofold, right? Is that there's the things you want to do, you're already doing, let's just get smarter, more focal on because we were spending some time engaging and doing some research. But then in that research and engagement, we're learning that there's these other things that are just going to need wholly new kind of enterprise and attention in a way that maybe you wouldn't normally do as kind of business as the city currently goes about doing things.
Yeah. Just real quickly, the only thing I would add is, to Morgan's point, some of those place-based tools, TIF or otherwise, can be very specific to an area. It's a great point on the programmatic changes and whether that would be just better to have citywide. Probably makes the most sense, but I think what we're suggesting is some of the people who might utilize those programs would be a little more prevalent in this area.
Thank you. Councilmember Ryan.
Thank you. I definitely lived in a naturally occurring affordable housing unit at one time and had a completely different name for it. So trying to repackage that. I have some questions about outreach. I heard, there's the slides that says, what did people tell us? I heard there was a focus group. There was a mention that Tina had gone to businesses to speak to business owners, and going to people, I think and meeting them where they're at, I think is really effective. So was there just a focus group, or and how many people were in the focus group? Who was solicited for it? Like, it feels like if it's just a focus group, that might not be a good sample size for informing this entire process.
I'll take it. So definitely we, in the full report, will give more details on like who all came, what all the focus groups were, how many businesses we talked to. So we can give you more of those details, but just in broad brushstrokes, we had a focus group that was really, the conversation was around workforce development. So those were community-based organizations that are doing workforce development, the colleges, employers, I forget who else, who am I not saying, but generally those folks who are engaged in training, creating pathways, and thinking about how workers are connected with career wage jobs and what the needs are in terms of skills. So that was a super rich conversation. Pretty sure if I'm right, there were like 18 different organizations represented. And it was a really great and well and engaged group. We got a lot of really interesting feedback, and ultimately, I really appreciated Corinne's like distilling that down. People want to make sure that the community is connected with employers and programs, and that people are aware of what's available. The employers want to be connected with career-connected learning to make sure that people are designing training programs and workforce development programs that really build the skills that folks need, especially soft skills. And then I think there was a real, excitement about having everybody in the room together. I thought that was super interesting that people were like, we've not all been in a room together. Some subgroups in certain spaces, and I'm not saying we need to make a lot more meetings, but I think this idea of the city as convener and the city as connector could be really powerful around that. So that's the workforce piece. And then I'll just say, initially we thought we would do a focus group of kind of 10 to 15 small businesses. And as we started working to build relationships and invite people, it was clear that that was not going to happen, that folks were busy, folks don't want to be in meetings. So what we ended up doing was actually just like going out with our Spanish speaking staff and English speaking staff together in a team so we could speak to people in language, and then really asking them kind of like, what are the key things that you are struggling with? What is it that's going well for you? If there was something the city could do to help you, what would that be? And so we pulled together that data, and perhaps it shouldn't be a surprise, but like we heard very loud and clear that there were concerns about public safety. And it wasn't like, oh, the homeless people are like causing problems. It was like people who are committing crimes, who are dealing and using drugs. And then also folks who are having behavioral health issues, mental health issues, that we need better tools to be able to address some of those issues so that people feel safe and people feel welcome in the community and people feel taken care of. So that was really helpful. And then also just recognizing that people didn't have good connections to business resources or know where to go to be able to access, loans and marketing help or whatever some of those training programs were. And so thinking about, how do we do some organizing around the small businesses to better connect people with those services who need them most. And then the final focus group was really internal staff to explore some of the ideas of the city existing assets and how those might be leveraged to be able to think about meeting some of the goals, which is some of the slide that Corinne talked about. So this was a fairly focused kind of outreach effort. It was not like a broad public engagement effort. It really is focused on kind of some of the folks that are leading some of the economic development work and some of the businesses. Corinne, did you want to jump in and say something else? You look
One thing I'll add is that I think when it comes to the development side, this is just the first step in would be a lot more public engagement. That some of these topics, I think we got great feedback and we'd feel comfortable making distinct recommendations. Other ones, again, along the lines of housing density development, I think it's going to be sort of incremental.
Thanks. Yeah, when I think about this area and any engagement or plan to redevelop areas, I always think of the phrase, no decisions about us without us. And so prioritizing community and the people that live there and understanding their needs instead of having an approach of knowing what their needs are without actually asking, I think is really critical. I appreciated the conversation about displacement. I do think that a goal of increased wages and wealth generation without protections does lead to displacement. And so appreciate the considerations for that. It's also a great plug for the rental protections work that Councilmember Fossey and I have been doing to make sure that folks have the tools and the resources that they need to not be displaced by exorbitant rental increases. Along the lines of displacement, though, with the discussion about light rail, I think the biggest consideration and concern about displacement is Casino Square and the demolition of one of the most critical areas of and centers and hubs of this area because of light rail. So protecting that and ensuring that the community's voices are heard and centered, and the acknowledgement too that the Casino Road neighborhood has spent generations building up Casino Square as their community hub, and that it can't be replicated anywhere else. So I think that's an important point to include in this discussion when we talk about economic development. I do have another question, but it's a long one, so I'll just ask it offline. Thanks.
Councilmember Vogel, do you have a question?
It's more of a comment.
Okay.
And it totally goes along with, there's going to be eminent domain happening, and there will be displacement. And so what's different about this, what's different about having these consultants here, working with Dan, working with economic development, is to get those voices heard and hopefully utilized. We can hear voices all day. That didn't sound right, but, utilizing what they have to say and getting ahead of the problem, not falling behind and just taking over stuff, but actually working towards a better future for the people that live there right now, not for, and for people that come in.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Zarlingo.
Just a quick comment relative to Casino Square. That certainly is where likely near or where one of the track alignments and stations would be for the light rail. Also, that property is not owned by the retailers there. So that speaks to Councilmember Vogel's comment about getting ahead of the problem in line about the fact that a lot of these things are or will be happening in advance of the rail coming. So I think that there are things that can be done, but that's why I'm looking and ask questions about affordable commercial space, because I think the possibilities are more accessible and less expensive. My sense of it, at any rate, is that the possibilities are more accessible and less expensive if they are pursued sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And let me just throw a level of difficulty into the equation. We set up a community development corporation, or we encourage the setting up of a community development corporation. They raise multiple millions of dollars to purchase Casino Square. We lobby Sound Transit to avoid that area. It goes beyond, but the majority of the customers who go to Casino Square have to move away because of rising rents. Now the businesses that are there want to move with their customers because they've lost the customers that were keeping them in business. So it's a very, when you're talking housing, when you're talking commercial space, all these things work together really tightly. I also will I just want to throw this out there, and part of this is a policy thing, is that I am supported in this work by Julie Willie's Office in Community Development, which has a different flavor than from what economic development is doing. And it's not that they're mutually exclusive, they're just different emphases. And so you can see why I've asked the consultants, talk to these small business owners, they didn't add in, they also talked to like Zero Avia and Helion and some of these other innovation companies as well, for the opportunities. Because really on my side, I'm trying to create an economy that's really robust, that really works and takes advantage of Sound Transit's investment. I mean, the South Everett, just think of it. South Everett is going to get probably about $3 billion of investment from Sound Transit, public investment, 3 billion with a B. That's a lot, just in South Everett. So how do we take advantage of that and leverage it so it creates private investment of multiple 3 billions? Typically that's what you're shooting for, is a multiplier effect on that. So it's challenging. It's really, Councilmember Bader asked, what are you kind of specifically doing? Obviously, workforce development and all these things are things we want to do throughout the whole area. But years ago, when I was taking a public speaking course, the public speaker who was giving the course was saying, if you look at one person in the eye, even if you're in a big auditorium, several people around them will get the feeling that you're looking right at them as well. But you've got to focus. If you just kind of look generally at section 48, then nobody feels like you're talking to them. And so in some ways, what we're really trying to do is focus on South Everett's needs specifically. And then the hope is that that really has benefits for the entire city and really the county and region generally. So that's our effort. It's been a really wonderful experience, but it's also been kind of like I say, it creates the added difficulty factor of how do you, as a city, where you have limited control of what you can do, how do you really strategically place yourself in the middle of this for positive outcomes?
Great. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. And with no further business, the meeting's adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.